G'day. Just going to have a yak today about the advantages and disadvantages of going to a 35-inch tyre on your Y62 Patrol. A lot of advantages and disadvantages for each, and obviously this is only my opinion. Some of it's fact, but most of it's just my opinion, and gives you something to think about if you're teetering on the edge of going from 33s to 34s to 35s. It might help, might not. Anyway, here we go. First things first, you can't argue that Y62s, I reckon, look pretty tough anyway. They look way tougher again with 35s and a bit of bar work. Right, the 35 I chose after reading a bit, wanting something with a bit of grip to really test out the off-road ability of this truck, which I've spoken about before. There's no point speaking about it again. They're very good. These tyres just helped that. They're very good tyre. These are a 35 by 12.5 R18 LT. So standard size rim, but they're 1 inch wider, these ones. And to fit them on, because they're a bit wider, you have to go to a bigger offset rim. So it's less offset, it just sits out more to clear everything, so to clear your brakes. So it's actually 18 by 9 in a 18 by 9 in a plus 20. Just have it stamped on there somewhere, but anyway, it's plus 20. The original ones are plus 40. Plus means the center of the hub face, if you like. If it's positive, it moves out from the middle of the car. So I've gone from 40 to 20, which moves the hub in, which moves the tyre out. Anyway, the 35-inch tyre, right? Yes, they fit. Now I've got a 2-inch lift, so I can't tell you if they fit without a 2-inch lift. I think some people say they do. With that 2-inch lift, I have no scrubbing in the back whatsoever. Does not hit anywhere up in there. If anywhere you expect it to hit up in there, but these things, with the amount of flex they've got, it seems to be okay with these tyres in the back. However, in the front, it does not. In the front, the 35s hit in here. In behind there's all this honeycomb stuff, so you can't screw it back. You've got to pull this inner flap off, get rid of all the honeycomb, screw it back on. Not a big deal, but it's just, everyone says, oh, you just put a couple of cable ties in and it's fine. I've got cable ties all in over the place to hold the shape of it. It still hits just there. Now, arguably you can get a wheel liner to pull your wheel forward slightly, so you put what they call caster in. So if that's your strut, if you like, they pull it forward at the bottom, and that's caster. So they pull some caster into it and it pulls the tyre away from that, but then it pulls it towards this. And in my case, on the other side it actually hit there, and this side it hits there. So it's in between the two, pretty close. So they don't really fit without a few mods. So that's one disadvantage. Of course, this is a true 35 measured with one of these old tape measures that has those things on it, has inches on it. So it's a true 35-inch tyre. The metric version might actually measure like a 295/70. For example, I think in 18 is a 34.2. For example, one of those measurements is pretty close to a 34.5 inch, and it probably fits fine, and it's technically more legal than this tyre. They come out with 33s, which actually measure 32.6. So because they come out with a 33, say you're allowed to go to a 35 legally. So 32.6 would be 34.6. At 34.6, they might clear everything, and that would be fine. Now it's only rubbing on plastic, so it's not a huge deal. It's just every time you turn, you hear that noise, and you go, oh, I probably should fix that. So that's one disadvantage of the 35. The next obvious one is that everyone says, yeah, they fit underneath. Right, a 35 does fit underneath, and I'll add that video in when I tried to squish it underneath there. It's a bit of an art to get it in there, and I didn't mind it up there and deflated and all the rest of the things you had to do to get it in there, but it sat below the diff. Now these things got really good ground clearance, but oh, look at that, that's pretty good ground clearance. But because it sits below the diff, some of the stuff I thought it's going to sit, if it's like 2 inches below the diff, sticks, rocks, everything else you're going over that you think you're missing is hitting your tyre, and you could damage the sidewall. Might not, but I'll tell you now, a lot of the places have been like, particularly Teletrack, all that, you would probably hit the tyre a few times, and you don't want to go there and pull your spare out and your spares bucket, especially when they're 400 odd bucks each. So I don't like having it underneath there, which means have to have it on the back of your car, which is fine. I already had the Kmart bar, so we knocked up a swing of weight for it, and it sits on the back. But of course then you've got to do your number plate, your lights in the bottom. There's other things then having it on the back, and you have to open it every time you stop and open the back door. And the other disadvantage is fitting it in your garage. That's an extra, what, 400 odd mil on the car, 350 mil on the car, that you've got to fit in your garage, which fits in mine, but that's, you know, that's going to be another issue, I would imagine, with a lot of garages, especially when you have a bull bar that sticks out like a wart on a nose as well. The next issue with these tyres, and this is the big one for me probably, like, oh, I missed one, nearly trod on that. This is the big one for me, the gearing. Like, this car comes out with 33s, and with 33s, they tow caravans nicely, they do everything really nicely. The gearing is really smick, and the cruise control works well, and the gearbox just works well, changing gears, whatever. When you go to 35s, like I went to 34s first, I had 34s on for the Cape trip, then I went to 35s. With 35s, noticeable difference towing the caravan. That's only, I think it's TR 800, but say it's 2300, 2400, whatever, loaded. Towing that with 35s, you notice the gearing changes significantly, and I find I just put it in manual, and I leave it in manual, and I'll knock it down a gear so the revs are right. If you're on a big, flat, long highway, you can sit on cruise control, no worries at all, and it's all good. But anything other than that, I just drive it in manual, and definitely not cruise control with 35s. Now, it wasn't perfect with 33s, but it was a lot better. Even with 34s, it was quite good. As I said, I ran 34-inch all-terrains before on our Cape trip. All-round economy, towing, everything. The 34s are a good size tyre. And of course, there's a big difference with towing a van like that, or anything over, say, we'll go anything over 1,500 kilos, compared to towing a camper like that. If you tow a camper like that, that's just not going to matter. Having the bigger tyres on the gear ratio wouldn't worry you at all. But that's kept to under a tonne, that one. So if I was to go touring longer term in this vehicle, if I was going on a trip even for 2 months or whatever, which I will be in January, I'm going to Tassie, be away for a while, and taking the van, I've got to make a decision then. Do I go to the 34 and make it so it, oh geez, so I tow the caravan comfortably, do everything else, and find a nice 34-inch muddy, which clears everything, fits underneath the car, and tows the van well, and I can still go a car off-road. I will probably go for that. Having said that, can't get over the fact that these look real tough. Go away, dog. The dogs have just turned up. Might come back later. And as I said, I think the difference between a 34-inch muddy and a 35-inch muddy is probably not going to be enough to sway you away from all the other advantages of a 34. I'll slot the video in of fitting the 35-inch tyre up underneath. It's no dramas, definitely fits. It's just amusing the way it fits. And I say, I don't care that it's a bit hard to get underneath there. I don't care that it's got to be deflated to get it underneath there. The tricky thing for me to get my head around was the fact that it hangs lower than a diff. There's just no point in having all that ground clearance and then having a tyre hanging underneath it. Yes, you can fit a big knobby 35, actual 35, not a metric 35. 35 for 12.5. There's a Nitto trail grappler. You can fit it under the back of a 62, but geez, you've got to push the front end first, try and keep it level, and then jam your feet in like this on the back. Slightly disturbs the shape of the tyre, but anyway, and use one of these. So I also needed that to get in there just to lever it under. Then it pulled up quite nice, although a little bit worried about the shape of the tyre, but anyway, and it sits slightly lower than the diff now, whereas the original spare didn't. But anyway, saves me putting the Kmart swinger on for now. Happy days. So even if I'm down Tassie and I dump the caravan at some base somewhere and we take off and do climbies or the lake up on top, Lake Cumberland, I don't want to have that tyre sitting underneath and know that if I damage it, I haven't got a tyre. So when you're travelling like that, it's not a real big deal to have it on the back anyway. In fact, if you're doing some big trips, you might decide to have 2 tyres, one underneath and one on the back. Even a couple of years ago, these tyres weren't as available, so I took 2 up the Cape. I had one on the roof, just a carcass only on the roof, and I carry tyre levers and stuff anyway, I can change them pretty easily. So I actually carried a carcass and one underneath, purely because these tyre sizes weren't that available. Now they are. They seem to be. 2 years later, everything's changed. One other thing to consider with the 35s is you've got 400 horsepower there, and up on rocky hills, you've got now all that extra rotating momentum. Is that inertia? What's the word for that?
Rotating mass.
Rotating mass, but there's a word for it in there for that.
Inertia, yeah.
Inertia will do. You've got that extra inertia, that if it does grip up and stops, that extra inertia, all that load ends up on your axle. As the car came out of 33s, you put 35s on it, so that just that extra, it's a fair bit. Put it this way, I think a lot more people break stuff with 35s on than with 33s on. That might be because only the people with 35s take them off road and do dumb stuff. But it's definitely going to be easier to break one with 35s than it is with 33s. We'll just put it like that. You could always drive more carefully and be a bit better on the throttle, but that doesn't always happen. Put another photo up, which is actually when I had 34 inch, so about 33.8 inch. They're actually a 305/65, which I think is just under 34 inch BFG all-terrain, and at standard height. Yeah, the photo's on the way to Cliffy last year, and it looks really good because the tyres just fill out the guard at standard height really nicely. So yeah, if you're at standard height, 34s definitely look really cool, but it's not all about the looks and the noise they make, apparently. And the last thing to mention is the low range gearing. When you're in 4-wheel drive, off-road, low range, up steep hills, you want lots of control. One more thing is obviously 35s make your gearing taller, like we said, for the caravan towing and all that. It's the same thing when you're off-road. It's you just notice it. It's not overly bad because it's auto and everything. It's not that bad, but it's noticeable that it's not quite as drivable in low range. It's like it needs another lower gear down, which sounds dumb, but because you're in the bigger tyres, so that's just life. When standard it's really good, since you put 35s on, the low range isn't as nice, but that's just another thing you get used to. And then there's the roof rack height. Because mine just fit into my garage, no worries with the roof rack on. And even if I had the max tracks on the roof still, which they occasionally live on there, I came into the garage after I put the bigger tyres on the first time at, like from a 33 to a 35, it's 1 inch, only 1 inch higher. It's 2-inch tyre, it's 1 inch higher the car is. Well, that was enough to make the max tracks hit my garage door and take the rubber off. But anyway, I just don't leave the max tracks on there anymore. That's pretty funny. Righto, we'll leave it at that. That is my opinion, as unvalued as it might be, on 35s on a Y62 Patrol.